This video is to help you with your Chapter 8 section of the Undercover Economist book. This is a case study specifically of Cameroon. And so we're going to just kind of talk through this book, and hopefully this can help you, especially if you're struggling with the text. Okay, so first of all, let's start out with the book itself. We're talking about Cameroon. Cameroon is a small country in sub-Saharan Africa, and the book, obviously, Tim Harford starts out with a very kind of blatant point. They called Douala the armpit of Africa. The description is perfect. Well, what is he saying here? He's saying that Cameroon has problems. It's got issues. And you can hear the sarcasm in his tone later on in that first page of the chapter. He says Cameroon's Ministry of Tourism. What do I mean by that? It's like the part of the government that does tourism. Its job is to discourage tourists from getting into the country. Well, is that true? Is really tourist organizations are supposed to discourage tourists? No, he's being sarcastic. And so kind of throughout the text, this is just an example. Remember that Tim Harford sort of has this sarcastic undertone as he's talking about Cameroon and some of the difficulties that are going on. So right at the beginning of the text, he starts talking about his experience in Cameroon. And he talks about how hard it is to, first of all, to get there. He had to bribe somebody to get the official stamp. He uses the phrase groveling. I had to do a lot of groveling, which essentially means begging of the government to let him into Cameroon. Now think about that for a second, guys. Who is Tim Harford? Well, Tim Harford is probably someone who's wealthier. He's from Europe. So you would think that Cameroon would want him to come to their country, so he would spend money. But obviously that didn't happen. Funnily enough, my companions and I did not meet many tourists in our 3 weeks in Cameroon. What's that statement saying? Well, he's being sarcastic again. There are not many tourists because it's so hard for the government to let you in the door. So he also talks about corruption. He talks about the problems in the country, like his first initial experience of the country as he drives in, or he tries to get out of the airport. He clearly shows that there's a ton of corruption. Again, hear the sarcasm in his voice as he says the country is earning the title of the most corrupt country in the world. Takes some effort. The airport is a disaster. The roads are a mess. There's no rules for driving. Driving is just a complete disaster. And he also mentions that everywhere he sees people trying to make money. They have little vendors. They have people trying to be creative in ways to make money. So he clearly saying, look, it's not because the people don't want to make money, but it is obvious that this country is poor and it's getting poorer. So there's problems here in Cameroon. That's what he's pointing out. In your second question here, this is the things that economists used to think that wealth came from: man-made resources, human resources, and technological resources, okay? But Harford is making the point, if that is true, if all you had to do was build roads, build schools, and improve technology, then just do it. Just give them roads, give them schools, give them technology, and all of a sudden they'll be rich. But is that what's happening in Cameroon? Has that worked? Well, no, it's not working. In fact, there's been lots of efforts to build roads, lots of efforts to create schools. Tons of money has been poured into sub-Saharan Africa from rich countries like the United States. So why isn't it working? If we've given them technology, if we've given them schools, why aren't they rich now? Well, he starts in on his theory. He starts in on his theory as to why they're not rich, why it hasn't happened. And he goes into what he calls the theory of government banditry. Okay, so this is on page 171. Now, who is this guy? This is President Biya, president of Cameroon. He is still the president. In fact, he was elected again, I think, last night. It was confirmed. So he was elected with a 90% majority. He keeps getting elected over and over and over again. And Tim Harford asked his friends, he's like, wait a minute, how long has it been since the roads were fixed? And he said, oh, the roads haven't been fixed for 19 years. And he says, well, why don't people complain about the roads? He said, they do complain, but nothing is done. The government tells us there is no money, but there is plenty of money coming from the World Bank and from France and America and Britain. They just put it in their pockets. So what do we see here? We see that President Baya is corrupt. President Baya takes money for himself. So he says, well, are there elections? Well, sure, there's elections, but he gets elected with this huge majority. And what's the point that he's saying? He's saying that these elections are probably corrupt. The government is in the business in Cameroon of stealing from the people, of corrupting the system. President Baya is right on top in terms of how corrupt he is, stealing from the people of Cameroon. Why does the government do this? Well, Tim Harford argues it's because they can. He says on page 173, he says leaders like Baya, leaders like this guy who are confident of always winning elections, are very detrimental to the people. What does detrimental mean? It means bad. They're bad for the people and the economies of their country. Why? Because no one's keeping him from doing this. No one's saying to Baya, look, Baya, you have to have real elections. You've got to have real elections. You can't steal our money. You can't be corrupt, because no one's holding the government accountable. Government doesn't have to serve the people. So when your question is, why is a lack of accountability for the government bad for the economy? It's saying if nobody is holding the government accountable, if nobody's saying government stop being corrupt, then that means the government can keep stealing. And you end up with a president like Baya who just gets reelected over and over and over again in fake elections. Now, the next section of the book talks through multiple examples of rule of law, okay? What is rule of law? First of all, nobody is under the law. No one gets special treatment. So an example of this would be like stopping at a stoplight. We have clear written laws. We carry them out. If you don't, the cop can stop you. You can get in trouble for doing that, okay? Now, in Cameroon, in this book, there are lots of examples of a lack of rule of law. One of them is driving laws. People just drive everywhere. Another one talks about police roadblocks. I'll let you read this quote on your own. But the police roadblocks essentially are saying that the cops are constantly pulling people over and forcing bribes out of them. So like the police they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Instead, they're just trying to get bribes. Police aren't enforcing laws. So you've got this huge problem with when he says gendarmes, what he's saying is he's talking about policemen. Policemen are spending their time harassing travelers instead of catching criminals. So bad guys get off because the police are spending all their time getting bribes out of people that they think can pay them. Another example, I'll let you read this quote. A difficulty in setting up businesses. An entrepreneur has to spend on official fees nearly as much as the average Cameroonian makes in 2 years. Okay? These ridiculous regulations are good news for the government because they can extract a bribe, but obviously it's terrible for somebody who's trying to make money in Cameroon. There are terrible labor regulations. Basically, the only people who get actual formal contracts of work are men who are professionals. So basically, anybody else doesn't get a job, okay? There's tons of overregulation. That means like it's just impossible to start a new job. And there's no protection of property. So like even if you're an entrepreneur and you have a business, you can't take any risks because you know that if someone cheats you, no one will protect you from that. There's no courts who will protect you. So what's the end result of all of this? Well, businesses suffer. You're not going to have a strong business system, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the two illustrations towards the end of the chapter. The library illustration is found in these pages here. And what's the story of the library? Well, the library was terribly designed. Water spilled all over the books. And the librarian actually said, I'm not putting my books in this library. This is a joke, And the book said, this is shocking waste. Instead of building the library, the school could have bought 40,000 good books or computers with internet. So what's the point here? Is it because the people in Cameroon are dumb? Is it because they're